paint at the sun. That way we begin. I'm here once again, and I'm deep and I'm feeling the pain. So who takes the fall?
Hello, fellow aviators, and welcome to the next episode of the podcast. Today, we have a very special guest joining us. This is Jeremy Bushnell, pilot and the owner of Vintage Air Tours, a business specializing in vintage airplanes and flight experiences. Jeremy, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here.
Can you tell us a bit about Vintage Air Tours and your journey so far?
Sure. So Vintage Air Tours started off with a 1943 Stearman biplane. I bought that airplane in the end of 2019, and I keep it at a grass runway in South Texas. So we're based about an hour's drive north of the Corpus Christi area. And I wanted to share old airplanes with young people, right? You always go to air shows and the people flying old airplanes are old people. And I thought, these are really neat. It'd be really cool if other people had the opportunity to do this. And I did a ton of research trying to figure out, how to get in to own these old airplanes, what it took to own these old airplanes, what it took to maintain and use these old airplanes. And actually, it's surprisingly not as much as you'd expect. So I took the deep dive. I went and bought Betty. That's the name of my 1943 Stearman biplane. And here we are, several years later, just absolutely loving life and sharing that experience with the world.
That's amazing. So what inspired you to specialize in vintage airplanes specifically, and why do you think people are so drawn to them as you were back in 2019?
Well, I think there's something special when you're sitting in an air show or in a fly-in and you hear one of those round radial engines start up. It just spits smoke out, it coughs oil, unique sound that you just don't get at the airport anymore. If you go travel through any commercial air terminal, Denver International Airport or, Austin, it's jet engines, right? You hop in, you're in a big pressurized aluminum tube, you go really fast, you get to point A and point B, and that's the end of your flying experience. It's awesome. That's what airplanes and air travel has kind of emerged into, but there's a whole nother world in general aviation, which is what we call, just kind of mom and pop airplane owners that hop in their own airplane and go from point A to point B. A subset of that, very unique subset of that, is the vintage airplanes, which is what we at Vintage Air Tours specialize in. With those old airplanes, again, it's more of a flying museum. Instead of just hopping in an airplane to go from point A to point B, you can enjoy the experience along the way, which is really, really exciting. That's what we're all about.
That makes sense. Yeah. It's like, in a way, stepping back in time and reliving all that. Like, flying no longer just has to be for travel. It's for the experience too. I really agree with what you're saying. So talking about the first time I met you at the Blue Bonnet Air Show back in March sometime. And if I'm not mistaken, you had like a PT-13 or something, and you were talking about its relevance towards the WASPs and its historic background.
Absolutely. So both our Stearman and our BT-13, which is actually just coming on board our fleet here, we're still having a big Memorial Day event here in Rockport, Texas, in South Texas. They have huge history, really unique history to the South Texas area. When you think of World War II, right, you think of those fighter pilots and the infantrymen that all went off and fought in D-Day and dropped bombs over Germany, and even the Pacific Theater as well, right? Can't forget about that aspect of the war. But all of those pilots, they learned to fly in these airplanes, right? So instead of watching the P-51s and the T-6s, some of those airplanes that are fairly common at air shows all over the world, let's take a step even further back and kind of introduce the training aspect, what it took to go get in those bigger, more advanced trainers, and then later on into the fighter airplanes. So yeah, that's what my business partner, Cody Stewart, and myself really try and bring here to the South Texas area, is you have that opportunity to relive the training mission that you'd have flown in 1943. We operate on a small grass runway, just like what they did back in 1943. And you're flying two of the airplanes that are uniquely suited to South Texas, and doing those same training missions that we flew here in our local area just 80 years later, which is really unique.
Yeah, that really is. I remember when we spoke for the first time, you told me all about the plane, and It was really crazy to hear that you flew it roofless over from all the way from Corpus Christi here in such cold weather and so high up. What do you think some of the challenges are of maintaining and operating vintage airplanes compared to the more modern aircrafts of this time?
Well, that's a really good question. It's hard to compare modern airplanes, especially when you're talking the modern day jetliners that Southwest and United Airlines, for instance, fly, compared to what we own and operate, which is a 1943, Stearman biplane manufactured by the same company that makes those Southwest airliners, right? Boeing Airplane Company, still around today, right? Very different in terms of what they produce, though. Our airplanes, again, a lot older, 79 years old. We're getting ready to celebrate our biplane's 80th birthday here in a couple months, which is really exciting. But has unique challenges associated with both owning and operating it, right? One of them is parts availability. So you're talking an 80-year-old airplane and parts that they don't make anymore, right? I can't just call Boeing Airplane Company up and say, send me this cylinder that is from a radial engine, which we don't even put on airplanes that are manufactured. They come off the line today, right? So sometimes you have to get really creative with solutions like that. But again, the cool thing about owning an airplane that was used in the days leading up to World War II and even throughout the time is you think about how much the economy really scaled up to support the war effort, right? So there were part surpluses all over the place back during those days to support the training mission and again to support the war effort. So those parts still exist today. You just have to go find them in the warehouses and private owners that own those, right? So a lot of it is networking or getting to know other people. And that's kind of a neat thing to be a part of in the warbird, especially the old warbird community, that you just don't have to worry about when you're talking modern training airplanes like a Cessna or a Piper aircraft today. The next big challenge is the technology difference, right? So a Cessna and a Piper or a Beechcraft, one of those small 4 to 6 place single engine training airplanes, right? They're fairly reliable in terms of, they're new, newer, I should say, not all new, but they're fairly resilient in terms of the technology that they're built with, right? Engines, you want to start your engine, it's going to start every time. Cold weather, warm weather, doesn't matter. They're just happy airplanes, they're going to go. A Stearman biplane, for instance, I have, nearly 4.5 gallons of oil on board. If it's really cold, you think about what thickness of oil or liquid does, right? In cold temperatures, it gets really thick. So sometimes it takes a little while to get those radial engines started. And then to warm up 4.5 gallons of oil, you sit on the ramp with the engine going for a little while to get to that operating temperature, where a Cessna, which has 6 or 8 quarts full of oil, a little bit different, right? It's ready to go flying a lot earlier. So again, you just need to know what you're flying and then be a steward of it. Take care of your airplane.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you think about, the modern technology we have in a cockpit, if you were to go and buy an airplane, from Cessna Airplane Company, right? Or Textron really owns Cessna now, but you go buy a modern airplane and it's a glass cockpit. It's a computer that runs those airplanes that communicates that information to you. Back in 1943, we ran on what we call steam gauges, right? They're not actually run on steam. They're analog flight instruments, but very simple, right? It tells you the basics, which direction you're going, how fast you're doing it, and how high you are in the process. And the rest of it tells you what your engine is doing. And that's all you need. The rest of it is seat of the pants flying. And that's what they wanted to teach, was basic stick and rudder skills in those days leading up to World War II.
Mm-hmm. So in the context, it was pretty efficient, yeah.
Absolutely.
So now, talking specifically about your business, can you walk us through what a typical flight experience would look like with Vintage Air Tours?
Absolutely. So I'm glad you asked that. Like I said, we're based here in the South Texas area, just an hour's drive north of Corpus Christi. As soon as you pull up, we have a grass runway that's really cool. You pull up, you park in our parking lot, you walk on out, your pilot's going to greet you right in front of the airplane. So imagine pulling up, there's a grass runway right in front of you, and this big, beautiful blue and yellow biplane is standing there waiting for you. You go hop in the airplane and you're ready to go flying. But before we do any of that stuff, safety's always first, right? So we take that seriously at Vintage Air Tours, as we should, and we have you help us complete a thorough pre-flight inspection. We're walking through all of the safety features with our airplanes. We're also talking through and explaining what all the different flight control surfaces do. And during the time that we're spending during this process, is we also like to take the time and explain to our guests what the history behind these airplanes are, right? Each of our airplanes in our fleet has a little bit different, a special piece associated with it that we like to share with people. And you'll get to learn, you'll be intimately familiar with the airplane before you even put on the seatbelt, which is really cool. It makes people feel very at home. We really pride ourselves in creating an intimate and unique experience that you can only get with vintage air tours. I mean, there's very few places in the US, even the world, that you can go fly a 1943 Stearman biplane the way it was meant to be flown back in the 1940s. And we pride ourselves in that. So we really love sharing that experience with our customers. So typically people come, they'll spend about an hour with us. We'll fly for 30 minutes over the South Texas countryside, beautiful Lake Corpus Christi. And typically when we do that, we'll let them take the controls as well. These airplanes are built for training, right? You have a flight instructor paired with you, but we like to show you just how easy these airplanes are to fly. You think about it, back in 1943, the aviators learning to fly these airplanes really only had about 10 hours or so before they moved up to the next advanced airplane. Mm-hmm. So they had to learn those stick and rudder skills very quickly. Our flight instructors can teach you how to fly in about 10 minutes, right? It's perfecting the process that takes the time. But we love to hand those controls over to you when it's safe to do so. And you can see what it's like to fly a 1943 biplane.
Oh man, those are some really great memories you can create right there. Speaking
Absolutely.
of, can you share some of your favorite memories or experiences flying vintage airplanes?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So my wife now, her name is Amber, but when we first met, I just bought my airplane and we decided it would be really fun to fly it on one of our first trips together up to the Dallas area, right? So from Corpus Christi to Dallas, it's about a 6 or 7 hour drive. Um, it's about that long in an airplane too, an airplane that goes about 75 miles an hour through the sky, right? So it wasn't very quick, but we really enjoyed the time doing it. We actually stopped about halfway at an air show, hung out at the air show, and then the next day we continued on with the next 4 hours of our journey. But it was about 8 hours of flying time. And just let it talk about a beautiful way to see the countryside, right? We're, about 2,000 feet above the ground. You can see all the cars, you can see all the trees, and smell all the cows as you're flying over. So you really have a unique perspective on what the world underneath you is like. And it really makes you appreciate, what these airplanes can do for us. Not just old ones, but also modern ones as well. But to be able to do that, powered by a 220 horsepower radial engine in front of you, there's something unique.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah. That seems a great way to connect with the people you love. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So lastly, what do you think is the most rewarding aspect of being, first of all, a pilot, and second of all, for being able to share your experience and this great opportunity with people all around you?
Well, one thing I'm very thankful for is for mentors and people that helped me get to the position that I'm in. When you think about it, you go talk to a little kid, elementary, middle school, right? And you ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And a lot of times they're going to tell you three things. They want to be a policeman, they want to be a firefighter, or they want to be a pilot, right? That's really cool. The problem with it is that everybody can go and become a policeman or a fireman, right? But to become an airline pilot or a military pilot or some other form of aviator or astronaut, you really need somebody to show you how to do it. And I was lucky enough during my childhood to have those people around me and help coach me the way to do it. I take that to heart every single day, and every single person that I meet, I like to share that experience with. And I take it personally. I kind of consider it my mission in life to show the path to other people that might have the same interests and pursuits that I do. And that's one thing that really drives me every day, is to be able to share that with people, not only young people, but also older people as well. It doesn't matter, but just to be able to share that pursuit and that passion for aviation, it's extremely rewarding. And I don't know if you noticed at that air show, but I was sitting out there, I was talking to people for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
And I would still be sitting there today if I didn't have a dog that I had to get home and feed. But man, I absolutely love airplanes. I love aviation. I love old airplanes, new airplanes. It doesn't matter. If it's got two wings and an engine, I'll fly it. And I love taking people with me along that journey.
Yeah, that's great. Connecting back to what you were saying about sharing that passion and bringing more people to the aviation community, I feel like that's exactly what we're doing here right now on this podcast. We're really expanding the reach and connecting you to people that would really appreciate your insights. So thank you once again for being on our show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much for telling us all about you and your business. And to our listeners, be sure to check out Vintage Air Tours below. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next episode.